a loaded off-season episode of Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and we are here to bring you all things college basketball on the show. And that means that we've got a couple of storylines that we need to break down. In the first segment here, we're going to talk about NCAA tournament expansion because it's become more and more of a topic as we've moved through this offseason. Now appears to be pretty locked in. It's pretty set. Everyone agrees that we are expanding from 68 teams to 76. So we'll talk about everything that goes into that, from what it means for fans, what it means for the logistics of the seeding process, how it impacts bracketology, the viewing experience, everything that goes into it. We're going to try to break it all down here in this first segment. And of course, we can only scrape the surface with it. It's such a big, just a monumental change for college basketball, what it means for the regular season, all the way down the pecking order through the ranks of college basketball. Here in this first segment, that's what we have to discuss. And then in the second segment, we are going to talk about the Players Era Festival. We've got the teams set now as of this morning on Thursday. We know who's going to be playing. 2-weekend event now. You're going to see 24 teams across 2 weekends play out in this tournament, and you are going to really find out what the new era of multi-team events is going to look like. No pun intended there, with the new Era Festival coming up this season. Some of the biggest names in college basketball are already signed up. They have a TV deal with ESPN. And so buckle up right around that late November into Thanksgiving time. We're going to have a lot of high-level college basketball to watch in those two events. But before we get to that, we've got to circle back here in this first segment and talk about NCAA tournament expansion. It's a hot button issue. I would say that the majority of fans in college basketball that I talk to, that I hear from, are against this idea. They don't want to expand the field from 68 teams to 76 teams. I think that it's a fair complaint. It's something that fans have gotten used to. They understand the 68 and, going back even further, 65, 64 team field. It's been in place for almost a little bit over 40 years since we went to the 64 team model. And then, of course, we've expanded it just briefly, small adjustments twice since then. So I understand the hesitance that we have towards going into a 76 team field, which seems like a very strange number. It's a little bit hard to comprehend. 72 is one of the numbers that had been mentioned over and over. If you're going to go from 64 to 68, how about 72 is the next step? You take, instead of 2 of the play-in games for the 16 seed, you make it all 4 of the 16 seeds going through a play-in situation. Same for the 11 or 12 seed line, whatever it is, wherever those last 4 in would have become in that situation, the last 6 in. Now we have the last 8 into the field, and we're going to play, the last 12 into the field with this 76 team format. So what all does it mean? Because fans are going to be upset with it regardless, I think, because it's more teams. It makes it more convoluted. We have to have a podcast sitting here breaking down what you need to know about those first 2 days. Sounds like it's going to be multiple locations. Dayton will be among those locations, probably 2 to start, I would think. And it's going to turn the Tuesday and Wednesday slates from 2 games later on in the night, sit down, into a little bit earlier on Tuesday. We're going to start seeing action and alternate locations with start times the way that we do during round 1 on Thursday and Friday, with obviously 2 locations versus the more locations that we see, 8 for the NCAA tournament first round. And I think that it's something that will start to grow on fans. The ability to see more day-long basketball action That's what we love about the NCAA tournament. Now, how excited can you get the general audience for two 16 seeds playing for a spot in the NCAA tournament at, call it 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon? I'm not sure. That's going to be the key for them to really sell this and add the value financially that they want to add. They're adding more inventory, but does that inventory matter? So we talk about that from the 16 seed perspective. And now, not just the bottom seed line is going to be involved in these play-in games. You're going to also see two 15 seed matchups come down to whether you can win a play-in situation. Now, what that does for the overall seed line is very interesting because we go from 6 teams on that 16 seed line up to 8. So now that shifts everyone down the board 2 spots in terms of the automatic qualifiers who would not reach the field as an at-large candidate. And then you add 2 more into the 15 seed line. There's now 6 teams that will be in the 15 seed line rather than 4. So you're talking about overall adding 4 spots on these bottom 2 seed lines. That's a full seed line that you are moving teams down. You're now talking about the top 14 seed from last year becoming the top 15 seed in years to come. That's going to impact how we view these different matchups heading into the NCAA tournament. I use the famous 5 versus 12 matchup as the greatest example. Those 12 seeds were typically teams like Belmont, teams like McNeese, teams that had gone nearly perfect through the regular season. Couple of scratches through non-conference play when they took a step up and faced a top 25 level team. 1 or 2 knocks in the conference schedule, but went on to dominate their conference tournament. Really, from start to finish, had no troubles with anyone in their conference. They're playing on a different level than the teams that are around them where they're playing. And now they head into a one-off situation against a 5 seed. And the 5 seed line is, yes, good teams, top 25 teams, if we're going through the bracket, top 20 teams, really. But oftentimes, those teams that sit on the 5 seed line are those that were hovering in the 4 seed conversation and lost down the stretch, just fell out of the potential to be a top 16 overall seed, to host one of these regionals. And so you often got a team that's not in its best form, isn't really living up to what they thought they could be at some point during the season, against a team that's red hot, hasn't lost in months, feeling really good about themselves, great team camaraderie, and potentially a coach who's on his way to bigger and better things. That's what we've gotten used to in that 5-12 game. Well, you're now going to see those teams shift down a full seed line. And so we're talking about them being 13 seeds. And it's not just that we're going to have to adjust from talking about the famous 5-12 matchup to now it becomes the 4-13 matchup. And we look for the 13 seed that's going to pull the upset. It goes deeper than that. And this is another area that I think that fans have some frustration with NCAA tournament expansion, is that things have gotten chalkier. With NIL, with the transfer portal, they have gotten chalkier. Now, I fight back against the idea that there's no Cinderellas in this sport. I think that they still exist. I think that they might become more rare. I think that it's really down to the coach and staff to put together the best pieces available. We see every year guys make moves from the mid-major ranks to the high-major ranks. Well, that means that there's talent available in these mid-major ranks. You've just got to identify it, recruit it, and land a cohesive roster. I think that we can still see upsets in the NCAA tournament, but this is going to make it more difficult. Because now, rather than playing those 5 seeds that we just talked about, some of them a little bit underwhelming, some of them coming in on cold streaks. Well, now you're facing the 4 seeds. And just look at last year's 4 seeds. There were some really high-level teams in that mix. You even had Arkansas coming off of an SEC championship with Darius Acuff shooting 50% from three, averaging 30 points a game in that 4 seed slot. So that team that everyone would have gotten behind to pull off an upset, make some noise, get into the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, well, now they've got to go through a much better team in that first round. So I do think it leads towards even more chalky results in the NCAA tournament. And that doesn't even get us into the bubble conversation, because the NCAA tournament bubble, I think, suffers from this. It's going to become a much weaker bubble, and we've had some weak bubbles in the last few years already at 68 teams. This past year, there was not a group of teams knocking at the door, really making their case for an NCAA tournament spot that didn't make the field. And even then, we had Miami, Ohio make the field with some metrics that did line up, some that didn't. Of course, their overall record is what got them into the field. But it's not like we looked at Auburn, we looked at Oklahoma, those teams that were just on the wrong side of things and thought that they got screwed or that they deserved a spot in this NCAA tournament field. We shift down 8 positions now, 8 more teams into the field. So all 4 of the first 4 out from this past season that we didn't really view as worthy candidates for this position, and then take 4 more beyond that. We start getting into Cincinnati, Cal, Stanford. Those are the types of teams that would have been in the mix for those positions. And this is all without the reintegration of the Pac-12, which, based on where they seed, where the champion of that conference seeds, and where the West Coast Conference champion gets seated, could again push things down even one more position. Because Gonzaga makes the move from the West Coast Conference to the Pac-12. Multiple Mountain West teams are headed to the new Pac-12. So if one of those West Coast Conference or Mountain West teams that have traditionally been above the cut line, if they're now below, that pushes the seeding down even further from what we traditionally have seen over these last few seasons, over the last really decade plus that we've been doing this. So you're going to have to kind of adjust what you're looking at in this bracket for sure. That's going to happen. And so we talk about the bubble and 8 more teams being added to this field. Well, I want to go back to those teams that I mentioned there, particularly Cincinnati, because Cincinnati fired its coach despite a hot stretch down the end of the regular season, a real push, really one of the only teams that was pushing towards making the NCAA tournament. But they were just too far off, too early on in the season, weren't going to be able to catch up, weren't going to get their metrics where they needed to be. But they got close enough that in this new format, they would make the NCAA tournament. What do you do in that situation? If you're Cincinnati, does he have a job if that happens next season? Do they stick with him because of his first NCAA tournament appearance? It could have all kinds of ramifications. It's going to make it, I can guarantee you this, more detrimental to miss the NCAA tournament. You're going to see far more teams that miss the NCAA tournament, even if they just miss out, move on from their coach and hit reset. It is going to become, at least in this short term, for sure in this short term, unacceptable to fan bases for you to miss the NCAA tournament. When you look at how many spots are now available with 32 automatic qualifiers from conference tournaments, that's up from 31 because of the Pac-12 being re-added into this mix, and now a 76-team field. So 44 teams are going to get at-large bids. Of course, you can take out 6 to 7, or add in, 6 to 7 from conference championships that would have been above that cut line anyways. So really all you've got to do to secure your spot in this NCAA tournament format is be a top 50 team in college basketball. And I don't know many Power Five fan bases out there that don't view themselves as a top 50 program in the sport of college basketball. So you're going to see a lot shorter leashes. We're already seeing the NIL push this offseason, how competitive it has been. The price of rosters is only going up. No matter what coaches want to say about unsustainable models, athletic directors want to say about the inability to pay, they're paying. And the best teams in college basketball are paying big money to bring in talented players that are going to have a chance to win it all in the national championship. Some of those teams will be playing in the Players Era Festival this season. We'll run you through the field for both of those brackets, what it means for the future of multi-team events right here on 3 True Values. Stick around for this second segment. Welcome back in here on 3 True Values as we keep talking through the offseason in college basketball. Big announcement came down this morning. The Players Era is going to a new format. We knew this, but now it has become official. We know how it will be broadcast. We know how many teams in each pool across each weekend. We know the when, the where, all of it for this season's Players Era 8 and Players Era 16. That's right. There's now 24 teams that will be involved in this event. It will be spread across 2 weekends. The first weekend will feature 8 teams. The second weekend will feature 16. Among those who are playing in this first weekend, of course, on the week of November 16th, Kansas, Florida, Houston, Auburn, Notre Dame, West Virginia, Rutgers, and UNLV. So, a really top-heavy field, I think, in this first weekend. Florida, of course, preseason number 1 right now in the way too early rankings. Houston, a top team in those rankings. Kansas just added a commitment from Dennis Parker. They're going to keep climbing up as well. Tyron Stokes, of course, the number 1 player in the country, committed there. They're still doing work on their roster. Right now, they're trending towards being a top 25 team in college basketball. If you ask me to make a final prediction on where they will be by the time we tip things off, I do think they're going to make it into that mix. So you've got 3 really good teams that are going to be looking to make an early impression in this tournament. Obviously, a potential rematch of the national championship game from 2 years ago. Florida and Houston both in this field. But from there, this first weekend tails off a little bit. You've got Auburn, who's looking for a bounce back year for sure. I think in this new format should be considered at least a contender to make the NCAA tournament in this upcoming season. Todd Pettiford is back. That's going to be big for them, but they've got to continue to build out this roster around him, really prove something in year 2 under Stephen Pearl. We know that Notre Dame has really struggled. They've struggled these last couple of seasons under Micah Shrewsbury. Things don't appear to be trending upward in some dramatic fashion. I don't view them as a real NCAA tournament contender as we stand today. Of course, there's time to change that. But right now, I think they're on the wrong side of that discussion, as is Rutgers. UNLV, not particularly close to that conversation, but as we know, with conference realignment over there on the West Coast, they could get in the mix, I suppose. There's always a chance there. But West Virginia is going to be the really interesting swing team, I think, in this field over the first weekend, this Players Era 8, which will be happening in Las Vegas. What I'm very interested to see with West Virginia in year 2 is what this new look roster can do meshing together early. I have a lot of belief Miles Sadler is one of the top point guards in this class. He's going to come in and be a really strong college point guard for the next few years, I believe. for this West Virginia program, or if he transfers out, we will see. But he really fits the mold of what we think about when we think West Virginia. And this is what I said, of course, when West Virginia hired Ross Hodge originally. He fits the mold, what those fans want, so much better than Darian DeVries did. I know that it was frustrating for him to leave after just one season, but I think that this is an even better fit. I think that this is going to really become something that the fans can get behind quickly. He's built a roster that's got some interesting pieces. I love Finley Bizjack coming in there from Butler. You look at what they've surrounded this team with. Mohamed Sila at the center position, I think, had a really strong start. He needed to kind of filter out his game and perfect some things. But a guy who had made it onto NBA draft boards before an injury sidelined him for the back half of his freshman season at Georgia Tech. I think that there's a lot to like on this roster. This is a West Virginia team that could come in here and make some real noise, pop early into the top 25 if they can pull off a win against any of those three big teams at the top of this first weekend that we will see in November. So that takes us to the second weekend of this tournament, where 16 teams will take place in the Players Era 16. So it's being split into two different events. All of them will be broadcast across the ESPN network, which has bought the rights to this event moving forward, at least in this short term, a deal that they have reached. And so you look at the week of Thanksgiving, who all is going to be out there in Las Vegas. We've got Michigan, Gonzaga, St. John's, Baylor, Louisville, Iowa State, Alabama, Tennessee, Miami, Texas Tech, Maryland, TCU, Oregon, Creighton, San Diego State, and Kansas State. So again, there is like a cutoff at some point in this field where it does definitely feel like it is going to be the haves and have-nots potentially. Can Kansas State really hang with these teams in year one under their new head coach, Casey Alexander? Is Maryland, after a really bad year one under Buzz Williams, are they ready to immediately bounce back into competition against this many high-level teams? Oregon, I like what they've done in the transfer portal, but it's still some pieces that need to fit together. This early in the season, can they compete at this high level? TCU, a team that was ravaged a little bit in the transfer portal, can they quickly build up and find something in this season? Because there's not going to be many other places to hide here. Michigan, of course, the reigning champions. Gonzaga, high in the way too early top 25. Louisville is as well. Iowa State in there. Alabama, Tennessee, Miami, Texas Tech. I mean, all those teams are in the way too early top 25 as we stand right now. St. John's is the first team out of that right now. They're sitting right there, really just because they don't have a complete roster at this point. That's the main thing holding them back from jumping into that mix as well as top 25 teams. Baylor, we'll see what they're able to do. Losing Tunde Yusufu to the transfer portal was a pretty big loss for them, but they went out and got five-star point guard Dylan Mingo, and his brother also coming in, Caden Mingo. They've got the start there in the backcourt. They've got to figure out the front court still. There's more left to do for Scott Drew and this Baylor team, but man, they're gonna have to get meshed early, just like these other teams that we're not expecting a ton from, because there's not going to be any breaks. I'll say this, whoever comes out of this second weekend of the Players Era 16, I believe is going to skyrocket and probably be the betting favorite for the national championship. Because this is the closest thing you're going to get before we reach the postseason to indicate to us who has what it takes to win in an Elite Eight format, in a Final Four situation. Neutral court, two of the best teams in college basketball. You're playing for the right to go to the next round. This is as close as we're going to get. So watch closely. I think that if a Tennessee, if a Miami, a Texas Tech can get in there, Iowa State as well, if they can get in there, make a deep run, get to that championship game, I think we're going to look at them a lot different than we were entering the season. I think if you see Michigan, Gonzaga, St. John's, even Louisville is a big one that's going to be looking to make some noise, make an impression. Alabama in that mix as well. One of them goes on and wins this whole thing. We're going to start looking at them and saying, all right, that feels like it's the team to beat now. We saw last year some blowouts. And you know who dominated the most in that tournament, really turned heads and got us thinking about them as a national championship contender? It was Michigan. Just absolutely destroyed the teams that they faced in that Players Era Festival last year. So I think we're going to see a similar situation this year. Of course, 2 weekends we're going to see this go on, the Players Era 8 and the Players Era 16. So we'll get much deeper into matchups, what the schedule is going to look at, when those things drop, when we get into regular season mode, when we're starting to break down what is ahead on the schedule. But for now, we're in off-season mode, and we've got a lot of exciting things coming up. We are going to be talking soon with Jamie Shaw about some of the top transfer and recruiting classes in college basketball this year. Who's bringing in the most talent? Who has had the best offseason to this point? We'll break down some of the big movers across this offseason with him here in the coming weeks. We're also going to, of course, be doing NBA mock drafts. We're going to break down big boards, the movement that we're going to see, the NBA draft lottery coming up this weekend. So next week, expect for us to talk a little bit about how the official draft order will look by the time we get to that in late June. And really exciting, we're going to be adding to the content that we produce here. We'll be doing NBA off-season previews with our friend Derek Lewis. He's going to join us and break down what some of these NBA teams are going to be looking for. We're going to hold that till next week when we finally have an understanding of where each team will be picking in the draft this year. Then we'll start breaking down what do these teams have, what do they need, and what can they get this offseason. So if you're a fan of the college basketball game, stay locked in right here. We've got you covered still, everything you need, whether it's bracketology, the news and notes, recruiting, and the transfer portal. But now, in addition to doing some NBA draft talk, we're going to talk about the NBA here. Of course, we keep it separate into different shows, so you'll see by the logo which episode we are recording. We've got our 3 True Values. 3 True Values big board, of course, covers the NBA draft. 5-star values, where we do more recruiting talk. We might fuse those two a little bit more together than we have. And then 3 True Values NBA will be the latest addition to the brand. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Hope that you enjoy. Hope that you continue to share with those around you. We look forward to continuing to cover this off season and start something new along the way right here on 3 True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher. Thanks for tuning in.